Brought to you by concordiatheology.org, bringing you resources that support the vigorous life of the mind in service of the gospel of Christ.
Welcome to Lectionary Kickstart. We're sparking your thoughts for Sunday as you plan your sermon and teaching lesson. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordolo, here with Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Nafsker. They're both professors of homiletics here at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. You can hear all about us in our introductory episode, but trust me, they are pretty good preachers most of the time. All right, let's get started. Peter, where are we in the church here?
We're on the 18th Sunday after Pentecost. We continue to think about God working through his church by his Spirit.
And David, what are the texts this week?
Ruth 1, 2 Timothy 2, Luke 17, and Psalm 111.
As always, I ask both of you to tell me what you would preach about. To determine who goes first, in the epistle reading today, we see that an athlete is not crowned unless he completes according to the rules. So, when have you competed according to the rules and been crowned? What kind of sports award have you won?
Well, I've gotten a lot of sports awards. I don't think I've earned any of them.
Participation trophy.
I know.
No.
I think even at my age, yeah, I think there was for baseball and soccer, but I would have loved to have one for water polo. That was fun.
You played water polo.
I loved water polo.
That's
that
tough.
Was good. It was fun, yeah. The problem was it happened during the basketball season. So, and no one ever told me that no one has a pickup game of water polo.
And that's where you have to tread water like the whole time during the game.
Yep, you can't touch your foot on the bottom of the pool.
That's insane. You win. You get to go first. I don't care what Peter has to say. That's awesome.
But imagine a 6'4" person trying to not touch the bottom of the pool when it's 3 feet deep at the shallow end of the pool.
Oh.
Crazy.
That's why you've been out in the fountain.
I know. Right.
What about you, Peter?
Well, I don't know what trophies I have. All I know is Katie is trying to force me to get rid of my last basketball trophy because I had a bunch of them, and each time we move, she whittles it down.
Oh my gosh!
And I've still got one from a CIT that has a little bit of a net when we won CIT, a basketball tournament back in college.
Don't you have one in your office? Do you have one in your office?
I may be hidden one in my office too. If I don't hide them from her, she
gets
disappear.
rid of them. Right? Yeah.
All right. Well, it doesn't matter if I have or not because, David, you win. Water polo.
Thank you.
Good job. You can go first.
Okay. Well, I thought I would preach on the Ruth text.
Oh, she's the best.
Why do you love Ruth?
It's a great narrative. It's just a great story.
It is such a powerful story. What are some scenes from it that you remember?
Well, of course, like when Naomi's like, no, go back, daughters.
Right.
And it was like, I will go with you. But I mean, really, like her promise to her is really beautiful. Where you
It is
go, I will
gorgeous.
go. Where you die, I will die.
Beautiful.
Yes, I love
Right.
it.
Yeah. Okay, good. And we have that, that promise in this particular part of the reading. That's the problem, though, right? Because you
Do
don't
they
have the
finish
whole
it
book.
next week?
No. Yeah, and it's hard because it's such a beautiful book. So it gives you the opportunity to kind of share the rest of the story in the sermon. Don't you think that's important, Jessica, to cover the rest of the story?
It definitely interrupts the narrative arc if you stop on the way up.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, we wouldn't have time to read the whole thing in the church service, but I think referencing it, giving
Or
people...
you can retell it.
Right, retelling it,
Yeah.
fleshing out some of it, yeah. So, I know it's Ruth is the name of the book, but I want to focus on Naomi, and that's kind of the opening part. And so, just if you could read verse 13.
No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me.
This is Naomi's confession of her experience of the God of Israel. And it is exceedingly bitter to her, and the hand of the Lord has gone out against her. So she lost her husband, she lost both of her sons, and she is bitter. And when she gets back, I mean, it's not in this text, but when she gets back, the people of the town say, is this Naomi? And some are like, I think it's her. Others are like, no. And she's like, call me Mara. Bitter. I think Naomi is kind of, we don't have patron saints, but if we did have patron saints, she's our patron saint of disillusionment, of someone who thought it would go one way, and it went completely south. Right? Her life did not turn out the way she expected. And there's so many people that I know who have that experience where their life didn't turn out the way they expected it would. Their kids didn't turn out like they thought they would. Maybe they lose a child. Their marriage didn't turn out the way they thought it would. Their job didn't. And there's this idea, we have this idea that if you're good and you go to church, then everything's going to work out for you. And it doesn't. It's not a prosperity gospel. And yet I think a lot of people are brought into that. And it upsets them when it feels like God has turned against them. And what I love about the book of Ruth is that we watch as the Lord works for a person who is disillusioned, a person who had thoughts about how God would act, and God hasn't acted that way, and yet God is still there for her, and God still works for her and turns things around. And that, I think, is beautiful. I have a student writing a paper on this Netflix show called, I think it's a film called Don't Look Up. Have you seen that? Oh, it is a harsh satire of contemporary American culture. I mean, it is rough, and it is in many ways spot on. So kind of the show opens, or spoiler alerts, the show opens with this PhD student and a astronomer seeing a comet that's heading toward Earth and is going to destroy the Earth in 25 days. And so they, share that message with the President of the United States, and nobody cares. The president's like, well, let's not release this information until the midterms because that's going to really work for me. And, and then they have him on a morning show and they try to announce it on the morning show, and the morning show hosts are like, let's not get too serious about this. I mean, it's just, you watch as our culture is so perverse in terms of, of selfishness that this thing is coming to the earth. Nobody is attending to it. And so at the very end of the movie...
Oh, don't give it... I want to watch it now.
Oh, I have to say the ending, though.
No.
I have to say the ending. It's a spoiler alert. I'm sorry.
Listeners, plug your ears. I'm plugging mine.
Okay. So, at the very end, the comet hits the earth, right? And everything is destroyed. And this main character has a choice. He can either get on this spacecraft that'll take him and all of the affluent elites into another world, or he can stay in this world and have dinner with his family. And so there's this scene. It's kind of like a Last Supper scene. There's this scene where he sits there and has dinner with his family while the whole world is falling apart around him. And what I loved about it was that there was this tradition. There was this thing that you did at dinner. As you sat around dinner, they pray before dinner, they talk about the food, they just talk about daily life while the whole world is dissolving around them, right? And it helped me see that facing death itself, there is a pattern of life that is comforting and that enables you to participate and experience love. And so you have this guy, he has a choice. He can either leave or he can stay, and he stays and he participates in this pattern of life that ends up revealing love in the midst of disaster, right? And I think for me, that's what's happening in this text, is that Naomi is bitter. She renames herself bitter. She says that the Lord has put his hand against me, and she's going back to Israel. And when she goes back to Israel, there are patterns of life that cause her to be cared for. There's this kinsman redeemer concept. There's this pattern of having crops that, you've got some gleaning of the crops that, a Moabitess could gather the gleaning and the poor could survive. And it's as if God has ordered this world in such a way that Naomi, who is upset with God and wants nothing to do with God and is calling herself bitter, finds that God is still taking care of her through the way he has established patterns of life. And I think it's a message of hope for us that as Christians, God has patterns in our life, patterns of prayer before meals, morning prayer, evening prayer, patterns of worship, patterns of, vocational life, how we enact our vocations, and God is at work in these things. And so you're disillusioned, you're not even sure if you should be participating in the church anymore because you feel like you don't believe, or if you do believe, you believe that God has worked against you rather than for you. And what does God do with such people? Well, he brings you deeper into the life and those patterns, and you kind of just live out your days, and you slowly discover that God's there caring for you. And that's what happens in the book of Ruth, and that's what happens for Naomi, which is why I just love it.
I think that's particularly helpful in a day and age where a lot of people, I think, struggle with kind of a meaninglessness. Their life just doesn't have much, like you said, it's not what you thought it would be, and it seems kind of pointless. And that can become a real burden because then the burden is on you to figure out the meaning,
right,
and you to sort it out. But the way you're describing it is, God has given us these gifts of these patterns that he provides.
Right.
And we kind of, to me at least, as you were talking, the burden of having to sort it all out is kind of relieved.
Right.
And you just go forward in faith and trust that the Lord will provide.
Right. And so you've got this woman who is exceedingly bitter and believes that she has lost everything, who in the end will be holding a child. And this is a gift of God and a promise of life and the, ancestor of David and Jesus. And, you've got this. And how did God do that? Well, God did it by all of the things he already had in place in Israel. And when she returned to Israel, she returned to a people, and to a people who have patterns of belief. And even though she was disillusioned, their lives of faith had an influence on her and were a way of God working in her life. And I think it helps us. I had a friend once who didn't want to go to church after her husband passed away because she said, everyone at church is so happy. She said, I won't belong. And I think that's sad. That the church is a space for the people who are unhappy, for the people who think they don't belong, because these spaces have patterns of behavior that are founded on our belief, that are ways in which God cares for us. And I think you see it happening in this book of Ruth with Naomi, and I think it happens today in our churches for God's people as well.
Now it's time for the Ask Jessica jar, the part of the show where we pick a question from the jar and I answer it from the perspective of a person in the pew. All right, David, what's my question?
Okay, your question
Make it a good one this time.
I will. Which portion of the 3 readings could use elaboration within the sermon?
Well, you focused on one of my favorite narratives, and so that would be the one that I would want to hear more about just because I love the book of Ruth. The narrative of the 10 lepers and Jesus healing them all and the one coming back. That's always kind of a little bit interesting to me, especially as a kid, because the children's message was always, you say thank you, but that's not really the message of the story. So that would have been interesting. And I like how you explained what the patterns of belief were that took care of her. So I think that you picked the right one. Awesome. Thank you, David. Peter, what about you? What would you preach about?
All right, I'm thinking about the gospel reading from Luke chapter 17.
Always say thank you.
Well, this is the thing.
That's the problem.
This is the thing.
Isn't it? It's not Thanksgiving.
It's not. And
isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Yes.
The reason I find this text kind of interesting, and I kind of want to preach on it this time, is that it's not tied to Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And I think in a way, this happens with some texts. Sometimes this happens with the Great Commission text because we read it on Trinity Sunday.
Right.
And this is where the liturgical event kind of hijacks a text. And what I'd like to do is preach this text in a way that's free from all the baggage of our collective gorge fest that is Thanksgiving. And
our pumpkin pie.
This
I have
text,
no problem with that, just so you know. The pie.
you can still have pie after the service.
Okay.
But the whole lesson on saying thank you, it's a fine lesson, but man, that reduces the text.
Oh my gosh, you missed so much.
trivially.
Right.
So
That's kind of fun, right? Because if the parishioners have been going to church on Thanksgiving, they have heard this many times.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have the opportunity to surprise them.
Yeah. So I want to redirect attention in a way away from the lepers, because that's usually where we invite people to imagine themselves. So to do that, maybe Jessica, would you start by reading verse 11 to 14?
On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers, who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And when he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed.
Okay, so Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. And he enters this village, this unknown village, unnamed village. He's just passing through. And that's when these lepers see him. Now, we know almost nothing about these people. We don't know the name of their town. We don't know their family situation. We don't know their age. We find out at the end that there's a Samaritan among them. But besides that, we know nothing about them except that they are separated. They are alienated. They have been removed. They are repulsive to the rest of society. One commentator I peeked at said that they were as good as dead. Mm. And so to the extent that I'd invite my hearers to think about the lepers, I don't want to think about which ones said thank you, which ones didn't, the Thanksgiving move. Instead, I want to focus on their situation before Jesus showed up, and that is that they were as good as dead. And that made me think about people in our society today who may feel as though they are as good as dead. People who are alienated, people who are separated, people who may seem repulsive to society. Can you guys think of who are the type of people who might feel that way at various times, and what would lead them to feel that way? What comes to mind is when you go visit someone in a nursing home and there are people who never have any visitors. I think about sometimes high school kids. High school can be pretty brutal, and there are times when kids feel like they are so on the out, that they don't fit in, they don't belong. They sit at lunch by themselves at the table. I think about people who've made mistakes in their lives, and sometimes we live in this cancel culture where you've made a mistake, you've offended somebody, maybe you've done something really bad, but then you are on the outs and you are no longer welcome.
I do know some women who have never had children who won't go to church on Mother's Day.
Makes me think of immigrant families at my church.
And this gets a little bit to, there's a book that came out just a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, called The Lonely Century. I can't remember the gal's name who wrote it, but she talked about how the last century has been like a train barreling down the tracks toward greater and greater loneliness. And she talks about the technological piece of that and the economy, the economic, our work, our jobs, our family structures. I think there's just a lot of people who feel probably, I'm willing to bet there's more people than we realize who feel separated and removed from others. And so I kind of want to think about in the sermon what Jesus does for this group of 10 lepers. And so you can kind of retell the story maybe, but I just want to notice 3 things about what Jesus does. First of all, Jesus hears them. They cry out. What does it say?
Jesus, Master, have mercy on us.
Now, they were at a distance, so they must have been crying out pretty loudly.
And they're supposed to be crying out unclean. Yeah.
And Jesus hears this cry. He hears their pain. He hears their loneliness. He hears their separation. And then it's kind of remarkable how he heals them, right? He doesn't, sometimes he spits on the ground, and sometimes he lays hands on people, and sometimes he says, be clean. In this case, he just tells them to go show themselves to the priests. And it's as they went, they were cleansed. So I think this is kind of an interesting, among the healing of Jesus, it just shows that he heals. Well, what it shows is that they got right who he is. Did you notice what they called him? Master. Right, now that's usually, I guess Luke's gospel uses that term more than anyone else. And it's almost always, I think this is the only exception, it's always disciples who are calling Jesus master. In Luke's gospel, it's not just teacher. They become, the way you put it is pretty helpful, living witnesses to who Jesus is.
Right, yeah.
And I think that would actually be kind of helpful for people today who feel separated, removed, alienated from society, that even the one who forgives them also sends them as living witnesses. And so this kind of affirms and validates that people who may feel they're as good as dead aren't at all, that they also go forth as witnesses to Jesus because he heals them too.
All right, now it's time for the Ask Jessica jar.
What would be a children's message idea for this sermon?
So if you were doing a children's message, don't let the message be always say thank you. Now, did Jesus give leprosy back to the 9 people who didn't say thank you? No, he didn't. He still healed them. This guy said thank you. That's great, but it doesn't mean that God didn't love them or that he had to say thank you in order to be healed. So just throwing it out there. I think kids, especially little kids, they understand the law just fine. Don't touch that, don't run, you can't eat that, sit down. But understanding the gospel, that's more abstract and that's harder for them to understand. So personally, I think that all children's messages should be gospel-centric. God loves you. Jesus loves you. Anything that points to the nature of God or the character of God, I think for children that's something that they need to learn more than anything else. And I think that it's healthy for them to be a part of a church service where they get to go invited up front and talk to a church teacher or a pastor or a church leader, and they know that they're welcome in church. But I think that helps them know that church is a place that's for them too. That's all for today. We have more free resources to guide your next step of planning at concordiatheology.org. Check it out. While you're there, you'll also find episodes of our other podcast, Tangible Theology Learned and Lived. Twice a month, I host conversations with Concordia Seminary faculty and talk about the ways that their understanding of God and their theology is real in their everyday lives. You can find more episodes of Lectionary Kickstart and Tangible on any of the major podcast apps. If you'd like to see the show continue, please subscribe for free, share, leave a review. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordolo. Join us next week here at Lectionary Kickstart when Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Napsker will spark your thoughts for next Sunday. Was this your Ask Jessica jar question?
I don't have.
I don't think so. You already got the Peter Preaches It section.
Okay, Dave, what do you got?